Hey, this is Malika of Evanston Live TV, and I have with me someone who I believe everybody should know. It is rare that people get to know who the real journalists are here in Evanston. And, I have my favorites, and this is one of them. Absolutely. Heidi Randhava. Am I saying your last name right, Heidi?
It's called Randhava, but
Randhava.
either way.
Randhava. She is a writer, journalist for the Roundtable. Many of us read the Roundtable, and I was telling a friend this morning. I said I'm going to be interviewing. I was so excited. I'm going to be interviewing Heidi from the Roundtable. He was like, "Well, who is that?" I said, "Exactly, exactly. People need to know who these people are." And I just want to say thank you, Heidi, for following the history bill that Representative Ford and I have been pushing. And you have been there to the press conferences, have been following it. And I just want to say thank you because you don't have to do that. I mean, you drove all the way out to the Sabo Museum. You did not have to do that. And I just want to say thank you.
Well, that was my pleasure and my privilege actually. And as we were talking before you started your show for a minute, it's something that's also personal to me. Your success with HB 4954 and 5851, both of those bills. It's so important for people to, number one, be aware of, and number two, for change to happen. And as I've mentioned to you, my own that is the one subject that I homeschooled my children in was history, American history. And starting in kindergarten, it became, when I saw that they were still in classrooms doing a kind of reenactment of pilgrims and Indians and Thanksgiving. I could see that despite the teachers, my kids had such, I mentioned to you, such wonderful teachers that can make me cry in District 65 and 202, but they did not have, the curriculum support, the resources, the materials, and they did spend money and time on their own, money out of their own pocket to enhance, especially grade K-8. And I think that one of the things you focused on is that early education is so important, and it can, I think, kind of set things right as far as for truth. Um, learning the truth, it's so important to start early. So it's been so wonderful to follow that. My own children are 31 and 34 years old, so that's going back a long time. But I cobbled together, I did not have expertise and did not study, at the higher education level, African American studies, did not take those courses, but I did pull together books, articles, and stories about our own local Evanstonians. I think when I moved here, I've lived here for 33 years, I was inspired by people who had been, some people have families who are here for 5 generations, and they had these stories. Even you would read in the paper obituaries about accomplishments that people, Black history in Evanston, I feel like is well documented, thankfully now, by organizations like Shorefront, by Dino Robinson, and also, within families. And so I just felt like it's so important those for those stories to be told when you look at America as a whole. And I think these bills starting in Illinois. I'm just really proud of that work that it came out of Evanston, and that it will benefit students in our entire state, and hopefully as a model for our entire nation. So
Yeah.
along with, we've in the forefront, with reparations, and both the Black History expansion and the Inclusive American History Bill. We're really at the forefront in Evanston with with things that could impact, can, and I think will impact our nation as a whole.
Yeah, isn't that interesting that a lot is coming out of Evanston, this small city of what, 75,000 people, and you have reparations coming out of here. Pray to God these two bills pass that could change how American history is taught altogether, change a lot. Isn't that something that it's
I'm
coming
amazed, and then not to mention these. And when we look at the age span, I'm just really so proud when we look at Evanston Fight for Black Lives. These young women. That's another thing. I've had the privilege to, talk with several of them. One of them, I'm actually is a scholarship recipient of a scholarship where I'm on the board, and she's the student at University of Illinois in Champaign, Amalia Loiseau, several other of the young women in that group, the founding core of there's 8 young women, and then more have joined since then. But when you think about it, that we had 5,000 people plus, at a protest that they organized over a very short time span. And that's another, amazing. I feel like they're a model. I've read, you see, I saw like a group in Oakland of young people. You see a national coverage, and they were talking about a protest organized, and it's not just the number, but it's the passion and the also the knowledge that they come in. Just when you have the truth, it counters, I think, both. We're in a kind of a crisis with misinformation and disinformation in this country right now. And I know there's an ebb and a flow of that over the history of our country, but there is a constant, it is a constant issue. But I think we're at a crisis point now, and as well with our economy and the coronavirus and several other things. But I do think that Evanston is really addressing, and people are doing amazing work for racial and social justice to advance that, and your bill is an example of inclusion, bringing us all along as Americans. Inclusive American History Bill is to say, why not? Why not include everyone? I love that approach, because it's really what is needed. And if you look at so many people being marginalized and not included in history, you can't overlook that history is basically the story in the America of white males. And as you commented really eloquently, those are not the only people who have helped to build this nation.
That's right. That's right. They're seen as the heroes, the only inventors of this country. And I'm like, why are we teaching our children this? This is not the truth. A ton of people, a lot of different people helped to build this country. A lot of different people helped to build this country. So Heidi, one, thank you for taking the interest in the story, because not all journalists, I mean, pretty much you're drawn to the stories that you're interested in or that are hot topics at the time.
Yeah, for me it's interest, because fortunately at the round table we do have that option where we're not asked to cover the goal, the mission of the paper is to provide equal access, free, to fact-based local, in-depth fact-based local news. And and we do cover things that we're interested in, because I think our publishers understand that you'll best be able to cover an issue or a topic or an event, if you're engaged in it. And that's not to mean that it's slanted reporting, but when we were talking earlier, the facts speak for themselves. So if you can bring the facts out, the truth of the matter, that's your job.
Mm-hmm. Yes, yes. But it speaks volumes that you've been drawn to the stories that I've seen you write on reparations and the two bills, because not all the journalists in Evanston come out for those. So yeah, that to me that speaks on. So do you really believe that a journalist can totally be neutral? Like I used to follow Barbara Walters, and she was very much about remaining neutral, but I could always tell where she was leaning towards, where she was, by the questions that she would ask and by her reaction. She would try to keep this straight face, but I mean, you could just see it in her eyes. And then Oprah started out as a journalist, but became a talk show host. Um, but with her, you can tell where she was more so leaning towards. Don Lemon, I mean, he pretty much puts it out there. Like,
Yeah.
this
Yeah.
is where I am. This is my opinion. I think, we're taught in journalism, you have to remain neutral, just present the facts. But do you think that still holds true today? Because we have social media. So, a Don Lemon may have his own personal page and then he has his CNN
Yes.
page, so.
You have to be caught. Yes. Well, I think there's two kind of famous people, personalities, who we all know. They do have the luxury of infusing their own part of why we watch it is that we do grow to have an expectation of what their thoughts are. But I would go back to now the Evanston Roundtable since April is now a nonprofit organization. So since 1998, the focus and the mission of the paper has been education, as far as educating our local population and surrounding communities about issues in our schools, in the city, and especially issues surrounding racial and social justice. Our mission hasn't changed. As a nonprofit organization, we are things like editorials. Our publisher, Mary Gavin, has in the past written some fiery editorials that definitely express an opinion. We're more limited. We're much more as a nonprofit organization to keep that status. We do have to be very careful about offering a side of a story. And I think all people have to, that would be one goal, that people are opening. If we're all just, that term preaching to the choir, we're not going to end up being very well informed. And it's really hard to even defend our position if we don't want to hear another side to a story, or another perspective is what we need to be able to hear and understand. But then there is still, going back to that truth issue. I just stay to the story that the truth speaks for itself. And I think that I think that people do adhere to their position, and a lot of times I do think it is based on positions are based on misinformation and disinformation. There are some issues where you can look at it two ways, but when that happens and you present people with the truth, sometimes they just dig in. and they dig into that misinformation that they have, or that those beliefs, I guess, belief system that they hold. And in that case, that's why where your work is so important. That's where we have legislation, because you're not going to change, everyone's mind. And I think the question, going back to the question, does the journalist, I really try to put the facts, like I use a lot of quotes, because first of all, there's so many brilliant things that have been said at rallies, I'm just amazed at, that we do have so many brilliant thinkers in Evanston. So again, people can analyze that, and I'm sure they might disagree with that, but I do try to be careful with the choice of quotes, to not put something that's so strongly falls within my belief system. I try to balance those. And then of course a lot of people may stop reading in the first paragraph, but they may not be drawn to read that at all. But my hope is always that somebody might learn something, like when Lashandra Smith Rayfield spoke up when a Confederate flag was flown at Lighthouse Beach, which is not all that far from where I live. What I tried to do is to put that in a historical perspective, and then hopefully people can see that this is not an opinion issue. It more moves to facts. There are facts to show, by, if you're looking at trying to be fancy about it, that beyond a reasonable doubt, this is something that's harmful, hurtful, to fly a Confederate flag or put an image of a Confederate flag out there. And so I think that sometimes just infusing the facts and, including them, I guess you could say it shows my opinion, that it's important to include the facts, but I hope that it doesn't show that I'm, biased in terms of that I just want to present this person's, a particular person's viewpoint.
Have you ever received heat, like maybe from the city or from someone that you've reported on, and it may not have, the facts may have made them look a certain way? Some people can't accept the facts. The facts are this, and this is how you're looking right now because this is the facts. And then you try to get the other side to the story, and then sometimes they don't want to give the other side to the story, so then you only have the one side to the story, and then so you have this person mad at you, and it gets crazy. I know I've gone through that, but I just get the feeling that not um, all of the media outlets, news outlets, go through the same thing. I was just wondering
Yeah,
if
I'm willing to go there. And our publisher, Mary Gavin, she, kind of kids around saying, well, you don't always have so many friends when she's been doing this since 1998. And I would say I will give that story about the Confederate flag being the image of it. It was on a beach towel, but one person made a comment on to the roundtable saying, "Oh, this was good. Now I have some background. I actually learned some things I didn't know, so I'm able to put this in perspective. It was helpful to know this now, because I don't think where I'm ignorant, especially as a white person, where I'm ignorant, I don't think ignorance itself is bad, but I think that's what the roundtable, I hope that we're trying to do, that we're trying to, you know, make space for and facilitate like that people will be open to learning. That's what I've tried to do. And I did have, and someone else commented about that article about the Confederate flag saying, oh, well, here you go. I thought that there's freedom of speech and, you're kind of, you're sort of clashing with what your whole premise to this story is. And um, I thought about that, and I would say the person has a right to their opinion for sure. And if they believe that that's freedom of speech, that that is fine. The question is more common sense, given history, given the hurt and harm. Is this a it's a kind of a between moral compass, your moral compass, and then actually the danger of doing that type of thing that incites. And I think that's where the law sometimes does come into it. Certain behaviors, I do think, I'm not an expert on the subject, but I think that certain behaviors can incite violence, and I think that's where the law does come into it. So there are some. It's open for opinion. I won't say that I respect the person's opinion that they think it was free speech because of the the very real harm
Mhm.
uh, that I think doing something like that caused. That's just one small example, really.
Yeah, with that Confederate flag situation, one of the people that was out there with the towel, the Confederate flag towel, he did contact me because I had interviewed LaShondra, and he
Yes,
reached out to me and he was very, very upset. And I said, well, you are more than welcome to come on Evanston Live TV and, let people hear what you have to say, but he didn't want to do that.
you
He
got.
just wanted to let me know he was very upset that I interviewed her.
And
And
I think that's where intent versus impact comes. And I think that is a huge issue again for the majority population, for the white population. And they explained that at a rally. And I think that that's something that when you're in that majority population, you can go along in life and be oblivious to that, the difference between intent and impact. And not to personalize or um, denigrate that particular person, but I do understand. I do understand where a person would say that was not our intent at all. That's our beach towel that I grabbed out of the garage. I don't think so, but um, you could say that's our old beach towel that we grabbed out of the garage or whatever. But I think that that's where we have an obligation to learn the truth, and there is an obligation when you don't wear your seat belt, when you don't put your child in a seat belt, when you drive 90 miles an hour in a 55. It's your obligation to be aware of what's safe, not just what the law is. You might be over the limit. There's not a great chance you're going to be arrested when you don't wear your seatbelt, when you don't put a seatbelt on your child, or when you speed. There's the bigger chance you will get into an accident and danger yourself and others and your child. That's really a moral issue. There is the law, um, but it's the moral reason. It's our moral compass that's the reason why we don't drive 90 on the expressway and weave in and out of between in traffic. It's kind of the just a comparison where an analogy where we're obligated to learn and to find out. So to say well, um, I didn't, it wasn't my intention. I think we're under an obligation now, and there's enough information out there that we increase our awareness, that we learn, and that we all, as American citizens, I feel like would be aware of the pain and harm. And again, we're just talking about one little example. There are so many examples, but I think these issues of like we'll see. So what one of the types of signs that sums it up are these silence is violence, or your silence speaks volumes. In Evanston Fight for Black Lives rallies and marches, you'll see those signs. And I think that um, where we're silent, as I'll, I'll speak for like the white population, where we have an issue of being silent is where it is uncomfortable or inconvenient. And speaking up, and just as an example, if there are studies that show that, let's say, if you're at a backyard gathering or barbecue of your neighbor, that if there is a comment that's, sexist, racist, homophobic, harmful, people, even people who are passionate, who consider themselves to be progressive, who consider themselves to be aware, they might be hesitant to rock the boat. And here you have your nice background, your neighbor's background party. Do you really want to shake things up and come out and say, you kind of, people sometimes ever so gently say something, but a lot of times people don't just speak up and speak out because the setting, they feel like, well, I might cause discomfort to someone else, or it's uncomfortable to me. And it's really, oh, you kind of say that's an inconvenient time to bring up politics or something like that. And it's not politics, that's just you know humanity. It's again, it's an obligation to really speak up and speak out. And I think that's a criticism or did not, we just recently, I heard a Supreme Court justice nominee who's will probably be soon on the Supreme Court, so strongly and vehemently say, I am not a racist. And the denial right there to me is a red flag, because if we don't know, I would say for myself, we don't know our implicit biases. That's why they're implicit, they're unconscious. So we don't have an awareness where we don't have a full awareness of it. Those are from our earliest childhood, our earliest experiences. And the same thing with our, a sense of white privilege. Hopefully people acknowledge that they have it. Not all people do. But again, it's really hard to measure it. It's really hard to know the impact. You try to learn about it. You have an obligation to learn about it. So to me, it's kind of ludicrous, that denial to say I'm not a racist. Of course, I welcome if someone, and it does sting. It is a stinging thing when people bring up saying, hey, and they call you out on it. But I hope that I rely my adult children, my friends, people who are not my friends, I welcome still, even if it is stinging, if I say something or do something where I don't have an awareness, I'm happy to be told. And again, that's not to say I'm happy as in it feels great, because it doesn't. But on the other hand, it's important. And I hope that all people are willing, or more Americans are willing to go there, and accept that and try to learn, just learn.
Do you find that difficult being in a small city, like you were saying, Mary, that owns the founder of Roundtable,
Yes.
says you will not make friends doing this work. I mean, there were times when I had people standing outside the Civic Center waiting for me because they were so upset.
Oh, yeah, I can
at me.
imagine.
But you're just trying to get the story out there, and then you're always trying to get both sides, but you can't always get both sides because one side doesn't want to.
Oh,
Especially
that
on
part
video.
is true. That part is
Especially on
true.
video. People
And
don't
yeah,
want to go on video, but like how I just always wondered how other outlets, me being the black one in the black one in town, the black the black media outlet in town. And then, we also had Lisa Laude, Live Your Life radio. Um, I've pushed the envelope with for the truth, and it's got me into some heated positions.
I can
Um,
imagine.
and I find that I would get punished. Like, I would get punished for trying to seek the truth and get the truth out to the people. Um, and I know you all probably get some flack, but do you get punished by people, by masses of people?
That's
I'm
a good
just
question.
wondering, or is it just
Yeah,
me?
that's a good question. I think I would first say people should not be afraid. They should not be afraid to do honest reporting. And there is a difference. I think race does enter into that, and what the generalizations and criticisms will be. I think at the roundtable, um, you'll hear people say, well, you're in a comfortable spot to do, you have white people reporting on things that are, it's kind of, uh, that maybe they haven't had that experience, or you'll have certain criticisms, or people saying, well, you're in a lot of people there are in a position that that you know there's always the issue of, like, you feel self-conscious of if you write something as a white person, and that you like, other people may say, or think at least, like, well, do you consider yourself to be the the non-racist person, and kind of critical of the rest of the white population. That's not true. That part, I would say, is not true, because at least I think, I can't speak for all of us, but for myself, I would say yes. This is such an it's such an ongoing, as far as matters of racial and social justice. It's such an ongoing education. I think that the criticism, like when you spoke about yourself, I think people, again, I think race enters into that, because we've all heard those stereotypes, and those really uh, nasty phrases, angry black woman, and uh, terms like that. And you've spoken about that in your life, how your life experiences, if you speak to them, how will you be perceived? And I think being honest is just the way to go. I know decades ago, when I first moved here, I was interviewed by a black reporter, and it was about kind of this, how our housing, our segregation in housing in Evanston. And when I mentioned it to a few people in my neighborhood, or at Lincolnwood Elementary School, that the people who were white said, "Oh, he doesn't like white people. Like, you made a big mistake. He's going to make you look bad in his story."
Mm.
And it was kind of, had not been living here very long, and I did kind of clench up, saying, there is a possibility of being quoted out of context, and it made me concerned. But still, what the overriding, I thought, that's a ridiculous thing. And then what was the reason to believe that, would be my question. And when he did publish a story, and what he's my part, what he asked me was part of his tagline at the end, and it was that, about birthday parties, kids go in some suburbs, even though there is and was the segregation in housing, but a whole class was invited being invited to birthday parties in one of my kids' kindergarten classes. This is decades ago. There were several times, a number of times, just out of this small group of 18 kids, it was very close, and the school population, although the neighborhood right there at Lincoln Elementary School is not diverse, the school population is diverse because of busing, which is an issue in itself, but that the whole classroom would attend birthday parties, and they took a lot of joy in it, and he thought that was a great. I said, you don't see that in a lot of suburbs where a whole class, a diverse class, and especially we're talking about in the early 1990s, will be together like that. And so I really learned a lot from that, because the fact that I did let it concern me for a minute. When people said, well, I can tell you right now, he doesn't like white people with that. And so he will make you look, maybe foolish or something like that. But then when you put the logic into it, when you think about it logically, would have to say, like, why? And so things like that are these small lessons learned along the way, like people hearing each other, and I think our publisher Mary Gavin, she has in her little motto is to search for truth in the finest chocolate, and I think she does love chocolate, and she is so good, I think, at putting the facts out there. But the idea take that we still need to take joy in life, take joy in our relationships, find happiness where we can. But then if we're not always like looking for that truth, that really engaging in the learning process that it requires, then we're really kind of like, we're not paying attention. That phrase that you must not be paying attention, because if we're kind of bumbling along and not doing that hard work, I think Evanston Fight for Black Lives, people who have been at rallies, people doing the work that you're doing, people working toward Robin Ruth Simmons and so many others who are working toward reparations. They're doing that hard work and saying, really, all you have to do, like the being open there. The I think white population, that is current dominant majority population, is being asked to being open, be open to learning, and speak up and speak out. Don't remain silent. And one of the small ways, as a local journalist, one of the small ways, like for myself, that I can do that is to cover these important issues, but that are really ultimately going to benefit us. I think you and several other people, as far as your bills, the Black History Expansion Bill and the Inclusive American History Bill, have said that white students will be so shortchanged by not knowing the history. Your particular the amendment that you wrote to 4954, to the House Bill 4954, that's where pre-enslavement history, to know that this image you've mentioned, that Black people, as far as American history is concerned, this image of being here in shackles and chains, I'm quoting you, that's the image, and this rich history, pre-enslavement history of Black people is so important. And I know that there is a sense of, Dr. Michael Allen spoke to this. He said his history in school was the one subject, just like I noticed, that was the one subject where there was a big whole, he was walking in it himself, and as a student, as a Black student learning, that it's not the truth. And I would say even my children are of mixed race, and I know that they're one of the reasons why, as far as teaching, that I was inspired to do the homeschooling. In addition, I didn't try to zero out this what they learned. It was, as I said, the teachers did still do an excellent job. It was just that it needed a lot of supplementation and injection of truth to really compensate a lot for what the materials, teaching materials and textbooks included or didn't include, and also just the untruths that were there. I felt like it just helped. I know that my kids then started, my own children, they sensed, even with small ages, there's something that senses like that things are not accurate, that this story is not right. And they became like passionate about learning history. When I, as I said, I cobbled together what I could, what I could, books, textbooks, articles, people's personal stories, and they did then gain a passion for history. And I thought that was, again, and I'm in no way qualified to do the homeschooling in general, but it's something that impacted their choice of extracurricular activities, their choice of what they majored in higher education, what they pursued in their careers. And because once you start learning, you have uh, a passion when I guess your passion is sparked when you start to learn the truth.
Mhm.
Um, so I thought it was really interesting how Dr. Allen, and I told that in the coverage, quoted him fairly extensively in his own personal feelings. And some of that is feeling and how he felt. But as he said, his emotions were rooted in truth. I guess that's the important thing. They weren't emotions out of nowhere. They weren't just hurt feelings because he's overly sensitive as a child. It was rooted when he went back, where he was looking into that, where did that emptiness come from as a college student, when he mentioned this digital pilgrimage he went on. And he learned that, yes, this was no coincidence that he felt that emptiness. The facts show that the truth was was not was not being taught.
Right, right. Heidi, how did you get involved with the round table? How did you and why did you choose the round table?
Oh, I've been involved with the roundtable as a reader, so it's been around since 1998. Um, and I was always, I was always, I really engaged with the paper. Because it's hyper local. Robin Rue Simmons has touched on this subject of the importance of hyper local efforts. And it is a reparations is an example. Here we have that she's in major publications, one most recently on October 6th. There's a great story in The Guardian about her work, but you could see that her focus was hyper local. She spearheaded this work with the help of many others, and the expertise of many others locally. And yet here we're seeing it really widely acknowledged as a model for the nation. So at the roundtable, I thought it's really important to. I had been aware in the newspaper, and and so when they were looking to add some staff, um, went and spoke with Mary and Larry. I did know them before. Sometimes I had contributed photos and things like that. I knew it's a struggle to keep a local newspaper afloat, to keep it viable. So it wasn't something that was new to me. I was really familiar with their reporting. I think when we were mentioning to like Larry Gavin's coverage of housing, done a lot on reparations. His coverage of housing in Evanston, it's really our history, and it's not that it's so different from the rest of the country, but where it really clashes with things that we take pride in, because it's really shameful, our history of housing, and then that also impacts the schools, as our busing system and the way we do a lot of things. People, it's so important to be aware. So I thought the roundtable is doing that at a local level, even long before we became a nonprofit. Their mission, it was education, um, education of readers. So that fit in with, I guess, my interests.
Wow, wow. So what's next for Heidi? Because you're a great writer.
Oh, thanks.
You
That's
are, you are a great writer, and I was just curious, like, so do you write for other outlets? Are you exclusive to the Roundtable? Like, what's next for you?
well, I write for the roundtable. I do some ad sales. I do it's the roundtable is well, it used to be a small business. It was an LLC. Now it's a nonprofit, but still is a small, as you know, once you have a small organization or a business, anyone involved does everything, or anything that they can. So I do some ad sales there, and some writing, and we have a board of directors now, and I'm on that. So that is very new, like having forming a board of directors. That's new, and it's really interesting and engaging. So that's something that I'm now um, that I'm now really focused on as well. And we're hopeful that the paper, we're committed. Larry and Mary Gavin have been committed to this concept of providing equal access or free news, for all people from the very beginning. The paper up until last November, was delivered every other Thursday, was in print. We've been online for many years, but we had a print publication up until last November, and that was delivered free to every doorstep in Evanston every other Thursday. And that commitment to free news is, I think, um, is so important. But at the roundtable, as you know, nothing is free to produce. But it does cost money. So we are hopeful that people who can and are interested in will not only go to our website and sign up for our newsletter, but that they will become monthly subscribers, not in the way that monthly subscribers in the way of making donating to the roundtable, um, but that's if they are in a position to do that and they can do it. They definitely will not change. Will not. People have brought up the idea of, well, as a board, will you consider like charging? Some people say, well, we wish you would have stayed in print, and I do as well. Wish that we could have stayed in print. It wasn't viable at that time. We haven't ruled out going back to being both print and online. And some people have said, well, we would have been willing to pay for that. Um, and meaning that you would get the newspaper if you subscribed and paid. And our publishers, would not go there, because that just was not in line with their mission ever, even going back when they were an LLC, going back to 1998. So that's one of the things I'm excited about, being on the board, and and the roundtable moving forward as a nonprofit organization.
Okay. I didn't know you all had switched over to being a nonprofit. It's like everyone's going nonprofit. Um, yeah, I didn't choose to go that route. I was advised to go nonprofit, but yeah, okay. Well, that's good to know. You
To
guys.
remain to viable, but yes, there are changes. One of them, one of those that I mentioned was, with we've never the issue of, as you said, having these like a slant to an article, to or a story, where what I hope is that we don't have that. We have fact-based in-depth journalism, but again, these editorials and things like that, those, when you are a nonprofit, you can lose your nonprofit status if you're not very careful. This speaking about politics, if you're not just giving both sides, but things like an editorial. And again, if it's a fact based, I don't write those. I'm sure you'll see some things from Mary Gavin, but there are, I guess there are limitations on that you do face as a nonprofit. So it's a learning curve, and it is a way to stay. For us, it was way to stay viable, and it seems like a lot of local newspapers are doing it. We're and that seemed to be one route for us that we hope is going to work. And the other great thing about it, in our case, it did stay in line with our mission, which has been um, educating Evanstonians.
Alright, well, thank you so much for your time today, Heidi. It's always
Thank
good to
you.
know who these writers are. Who are these people? Who are? I just feel like Evanstonians should know who these
Oh,
people are.
yeah, that's very nice, Joe. And it's really sweet of you to think about that, and to include, me and the roundtable. And I think that, um, as we were saying earlier, sometimes writers do get, if they say something, or write something that's either controversial or incorrect, sometimes you hear their names a little more. But again, even that, I don't think it's anything uh, to be afraid of. And there are mistakes that are made, and I think it's a great that people do have conversations around what's written and what's produced. So it's been great talking with you, and I so much appreciate your work as well, Malika.
Thank you so much, Heidi. Thank you. And looking forward to seeing more from you. You're a really good writer. I
Oh,
appreciate
thanks. That is the best compliment from you. And yeah, take care and have a good day and be safe.
it. Okay, you too.
Bye
Bye.
bye.
Okay, this is Malika, Evanston Live TV, and that was Heidi Randhava. I'm saying that correctly, Heidi, from the Roundtable. She's been following the reparations. She's been following the two bills with Representative Ford and myself, and she's just one of those truth-seeking journalists that I just feel, people should know who she is. She's not out there on video or, this personality. She is strictly about the pen and seeking the truth. And I just think I have a great deal of respect for good writers, good journalists, and she's definitely one of them. Um, there's quite a few here in Evanston who cover stories that I just think people should know. Lisa Lauday, Jonah Meadows, um, a couple from the Daily Northwestern, um, uh, who I reach out to, and they're always there. Um, and then you have Genevieve Bookwalter from the Tribune. I mean, you have a lot of great journalists here um, who really seek the truth here in Evanston. So just wanted to spotlight them. So stay tuned for more.